Good morning, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes,
Yeah.
good
Uh,
morning.
so let's get started. So myself, I'm Surya. So I'm going to take today's session. So let's quickly start the session. So let me share my screen. Please let me know once you guys are able to see my screen. So I'm going to give you a quick introduction about DevOps and various DevOps tools that are available in the market and what are all the tools that we are going to cover as part of this entire course. And before we directly go with the DevOps, so we'll just go with some basic introduction about the software development lifecycle. Okay, so these are all the things that we are going to cover as part of today's session. So first, let me quickly go to the slides. So this is what the agenda that we are going to cover today. So we're going to cover the topics like SDLC. So SDLC stands for Software Development Lifecycle. And then after we go and discuss about different ways of implementing the software applications like Waterfall, Agile. So these are the two important major methods that almost all the companies used to follow. Okay, and um, and also then we go for difference between waterfall and agile. So what's the main difference? And then we'll step into the topic called DevOps. Okay. And we have some CI/CD concepts in DevOps. So those concepts overview I'm going to explain, and then we'll discuss about the tools. Okay. So let's go with the first one. So SDLC. As already told you before, SDLC stands for Software Development Lifecycle. So first of all, why do we require this SDLC? For example, if you are a client, like you have some idea, okay, and you want to implement that application. Like for example, you have an idea to book some movie tickets, okay. So you're not going to develop that application directly because you're not a person who is from the software background. Okay, you are looking for a you're looking for a company who can develop your application based on the requirements that you shared. Okay, now what you will do, you'll reach out to some small company or a bigger company. So you will share all your details. Like this is what I am planning to have this. So this kind of information you're going to share with those people. So once they gather all your inputs, so based on that, they follow this kind of cycle. Okay. So first, whatever the requirements that you shared, so based on those requirements, they will do some analysis. So analysis in the sense, so what kind of tools, what kind of application code you can use, language. I mean to say, like if you want, if you're going to develop a Android uh, application, okay, on your mobile phone, then obviously you'll go with Java only, okay, and or Android, different languages we have, right? So we'll go with that software. Like if you are going to develop some application on Windows laptops, okay, in that case you'll go with the .NET. So based on the requirement, so you're going to choose the particular piece of language, and then we'll start analysis. Okay, we are going to do some analysis on that, like kind of troubleshooting, not troubleshooting. It's a kind of R&D. Okay, so the best practices you're going to choose. So once you are done with your analysis, then you'll go with actual design. Okay, so in analysis you'll try out with the different languages, and finally you'll fix with one particular language, right? So using those kind of options, you're going to design the flow, like where we are going to start and what's the end target server. So these are all the things we are going to cover as part of design. Okay, so once the design part is also done, then the actual implementation will start. So based on the language that we select, so that particular developers will be hired, and now these particular developers will start implementing the requirement. Okay, so they'll start writing the code for that. And now once the code part is also done, then it will be handed over to testing team. Now these testers will come and they'll execute some kind of they're going to use some kind of tools in order to test the application. Okay, in some cases we have manual testing, in some cases we have automated testing, but anything you can consider. And once the testing is also done, then it will go for a final evaluation. Okay, so the final part. And once it is also done, then the application will be live. So these are all the steps that we're supposed to follow in order to develop a particular application. Okay, every software company used to follow this, but the way they follow will be slightly different. But ultimately, these are all the steps that every software company will follow. Okay, next one. So first, let's talk about waterfall method. So waterfall method, it's a very old type of method. As you can see here, what are all the stages that we discussed earlier? It is also following the same stages. But if you observe here, these stages will be running in a sequential order. Like, as you know, waterfalls from top to bottom. The same way here, waterfall method will also be flowing from top to bottom in a sequential order. Like after completion of one task, the next task will start, and after completion of second task, the third task will start. So in that way, okay. So on the left side, you see here there is one mobile application, a sample mobile application that I supposed to develop, and you can see there are a lot of buttons here. Like I think total 9 buttons we have, right? So if I want to develop these 9 buttons, so what developers will do is they need to write a functionality for each and every button. Okay. So I have to write some functionality over here. Like if I click on this, it has to execute some task in the background, or it has to redirect to some other place, or it has to do some execution task. Okay. So that means developers has to write functionalities for each and every button. Okay. So if I go with waterfall method, so what I supposed to do is I need to gather information about all these 9 buttons. Okay, so I need to gather information about these 9 buttons at a time from the client, and based on that, I need to analysis for 9 buttons, and then we go for a design, and then we go for a coding part and testing. Finally, it reaches to maintenance part. Okay, so these are all the stages that we have used to follow. Here, using waterfall method, we have some drawbacks. Okay, I'll explain. There are 3 major drawbacks of using waterfall method. The first one is, as you see here, all these tasks are executing in a sequential order. Okay, like once one particular task completes, then only it will the next team will start working on that. So because of that reason, the duration of total duration that was taken to in order to develop that application, so that duration is too high. I request everyone, please keep yourself on mute. I think someone, Sharif, can you please keep yourself on mute? Okay, fine. So because of this reason, the total duration that was taken in order to develop this application was too high. Okay, so because there is no parallel execution or parallel development. Here you can see clearly that we are gathering information about these 9 buttons at a time, and we are developing this application. Uh, all these 9 button functionalities we are writing at a time. So because of this reason, the total duration that was taken to develop a particular application was too high. That's the first major drawback. And the second drawback is, as you see here, as we are developing all the 9 button functionalities at a time, because of that reason, the number of lines, like the code and the number of lines of your code will be more, because we are not focusing on only one or two buttons. We are focusing on all the 9 buttons. So because of that reason, the number of lines will be increased. So if you increase number of lines, what happens? Um, it will be very difficult to identify bugs. See, if I give you 100 lines of code and if I ask you to find out bug, it will be easy for you because you have only 100 lines of code. The same way, if I give you 1,000 lines of code and if I ask you to find out bug, still you can do it, but it will more difficult when compared with the previous scenario, right? So the same thing here. So if I go with a huge bulk of code, so it will be very difficult to identify issues or bugs. So bugs are nothing but, like, if you get some inappropriate output, that will be considered as a bug. So whatever the output that we are expecting, other than that, if you got something else, in that case, that will be considered as a bug. Okay. Now, as we are developing this huge code, so it will be very difficult to identify bugs in very initial stages. So that's the second drawback. And the third important drawback is 100% utilization of a resource. So 100% utilization of a resource in the sense, for example, if a resource, let's assume that person is from testing background. Okay, there is one employee who is from testing background. So he has to wait until and unless the coding team done with their work and handovers to the testing team. So until that period, so this testing guys will wait for your application, I mean code, right? So that means here 100% utilization of a resource is not possible, because like, if once the previous stage completes, then only the next stage people will have work to do. Until and unless, they have to wait. Okay, so 100% utilization of a resource is not possible. So that's the other drawback. So these are the three important drawbacks from waterfall method. In order to overcome these drawbacks, so later on in 2006 or 7, so Agile came into picture. Okay, so now in Agile, the total requirement will be shared, I mean, we'll cut it into pieces. Okay, so here, if you see, I have total 9 buttons, right? So instead of these 9 buttons, I'll make it into pieces. Like first 2 buttons as one piece, second 2 buttons will be on the second piece, and third 2 buttons, third, and next 2 buttons will be on the third piece, like that. So here, these parts we call it as sprints. Okay, these parts we call it as sprints, and there will be some duration of these sprints. So the duration will be decided by the management. Like in some projects, the duration will be 2 weeks. In some projects, the duration will be 1 month, 2 months, in that way. Okay. So your management is going to decide. Sorry. So your management is going to decide the duration of the sprint. Okay. And now we can easily overcome the drawbacks of waterfall method by using Agile. I'll explain you how. Um, Now, for example, let's consider the first drawback. The duration of that was taken to develop your application is too high. So let's focus on this Agile, and I'll explain you how Agile is going to overcome that. Now, for example, if you see here, there will be an application. Okay, so let's focus only on the first part. Okay, first sprint. Now the developers are going to work on this particular part of the first sprint. Okay, now they have done with their work and they hand over to the testing team. Now testing team is under progress. Now instead of waiting for the next sprint, parallelly they can start working on the second sprint. Okay, instead of waiting for the result, okay, parallelly they can start working on the second sprint. That means, so now developers done with the first task. So meanwhile, design guys will start working on the second sprint, so that by before they complete this particular development part of first sprint, they're going to hand this design team will hand over the second sprint details. Okay, so now developers can start working on the second sprint. That means here, if you observe, parallel executions of team will be possible. Okay, so we can make these teams working parallelly at the same time. Okay, one team is working on sprint one, the other team will be working on sprint two. So that means parallel execution will be possible. Whereas in waterfall, everything is in a sequential order. Okay, now because of that reason, the total duration that was taken to develop that application will be too low when compared with waterfall method. So in waterfall method, it used to take 6 months, where here it will be reduced to 3 months only. So half of the time we can save. So that's the first drawback we can overcome. And the next one, as you see, as I already told you before, so parallel execution. Because of that reason, 100% utilization of a resource will be possible. Okay, so here once your developer is done and hand over to the testing team, I mean, he can start working on the sprint too. That means we are utilizing that particular employee 100% utilization, right? So because of that reason, 100% utilization of a resource will also be possible. And as we are not sending the whole application code at a time, we are sending this application code in pieces, right? So because of that reason, the number of lines will be reduced, right? So earlier for developing 9 buttons, let's assume we have 1,000 lines. Now if I want to send 2 buttons, so it will be around 200 lines, something like. So that means it will be easy to identify bugs in 200 lines code, right? So mm, that's how we are going to overcome all the drawbacks of waterfall method. The reason why I mentioned about waterfall and Agile is the main reason behind this is DevOps follows Agile. So DevOps is a culture which developed based on Agile. So before we directly jump into DevOps, so it's always best to have knowledge on these two topics. So that's the reason why I specifically mentioned this. Okay. Till now, any questions? If you have any sort of questions, please let me know. Any questions? Fine. I'll go with the next part. So as I told you before, these are all the differences between Agile and Waterfall. So the 3 points which we have discussed previously. So those are all the 3 points here. And now let's step into the topic called DevOps. As the name itself indicates, DevOps in the sense, dev in the sense development and ops in the sense operations. So first let me explain what are these teams. Okay, what's the main background of these teams. So first let's talk about the development. So as you guys are aware of development, right? Whenever there is an application, so developers will come into picture and they'll start writing a code. Okay, so we are not focusing on the development part. We are focusing on we are mainly focusing once the development part is done, like developers done with their code. So then after what it is going to happen. So most of your guys don't have an idea on this part because development anyway, they are going to develop it. So that everyone knows. But once the development part is done, so what are all the things that are going to happen? So these things most of your people doesn't know. If you are from a software background, then maybe you might have an idea on it. But
If you are not from a software background and if you don't have any idea with respect to application management, then you don't have an idea on this part. Okay, I'll explain you. So once the developer done with the code development, so this code has to compile. Okay, so why do we require compile? Because if you observe, if you are going to install any application, okay, if you are going to install any sort of application, so you are not getting code, right? For example, if I want to install some software here on my Windows laptop, and what I have to do, I need to download that, where I'm going to get a format called .exe or .msa formats, right? So using these files, I'm going to install my application. I'm not getting any piece of code. Am I right? So how this binary file is going to come created? So this binary file, we can also call it as artifact. Okay, that application artifact. In terms of software terminology, we call it as artifact. Okay, it can be any binary format, like based on the application server that we are maintaining. So based on that, the format will be depends. Okay, for example, for Windows, we have .exe format and .msa. These are the major two formats that every Windows laptop we are going to use. Then when we go with Linux-based applications, then we have different formats like char, var file, car file. There are different formats we have. Okay, now first of all, once the development is done, so it has to compile. So what happens while we are doing compilation? So it will start executing your code. So once your code is done, so it will generate some sort of files, and these files will be packed in a form of binary format. Okay, this is what it is going to happen. Okay, so this binary file you're going to install on the target server. So let's talk about the scenario before DevOps came into the picture. So how it is used to happen. So there will be a separate team. Okay, we call them as build and release engineer. Okay, so this team guys, what they will do is whenever developers made some changes, okay, developer is going to share that piece of code to this team. Now these people will start compiling your code in a manual approach. There is no automation at all. Okay, so everything is going to be a manual part. So what they're going to do, once they're done with the code development, they will hand over that code to build and release engineer guys. Now this build and release engineer guys will start compiling your code. Okay, if everything works fine, then they will be doing some kind of testing. Okay, it can be a unit testing, functional testing. There are different types of testings we have. Okay, if something went wrong, again they revert back to developer saying that this is what the issue we got. Now developer has to fix that particular issue, and again they will hand out to the same team. So per day, developer will keep on updating your code. So for example, if he make changes 100 times, okay, that means this build and release engineer has to run that particular compilation process 100 times, because every time if you want to test it, you have to compile it and then only you can test it. Okay, without compilation we can't test it, right? So these guys will keep on running this execution. Okay, once this uh, file you feel that okay, this application is working fine, every options are displaying properly in the right places, and then the testing is also done. Now operation team guys will come into picture. So the main background of these operation guys are installing applications and maintaining application. Okay, So we will have different environments. Okay, environments in the sense server setup. So first they will be deploying this application on development server, because as I told you before, so once you got an application, then only you can test it. So if you want to test it, first of all, you need to place that under, I mean, you need to install that application on some server. Then only you can test it, right? So how you are going to test it? So once you're done with the application creation, first of all, you need to install on a development server. So now developer will open that GUI, and he will be checking all the options. Okay, whether these options are working fine or not. Okay. Then after, once it is done, now the same application will deployed on testing servers. Now testing people will come into picture, and they will start doing the testing of that particular application. And then we'll go with higher environments. So in higher environments, you'll have UAT server, user acceptance testing. Like we are going to test that application as user point of view. Okay, so that verification will be happen. So and then after we'll go installing on pre-prod servers, and finally it will reach to production server. So all these tasks will be handled by an operation guy. So this is what the manual process that used to happen before DevOps came into picture. So if you observe here, this in order to complete this lengthy process, so if you observe, you'll understand that this application is taking very long period of time in order to develop. Even though you're using Agile or Waterfall method, but still the manual interactions required. So because of this reason, even though you're going to reduce the time over there in Agile, but still you're going to face some serious issues. So in order to overcome these scenarios, so DevOps was introduced. So as the name itself, like earlier, there is no transparency between development team as well as an operation team. Like if I go directly and if I ask an operation guy, so what's the status of the development part? So he will definitely say, I don't know anything about it, because there is no transparency. They don't have an idea. So what developers are developing and what we are installing, they don't have a clear idea on that. So now what we are doing after once DevOps came into picture, we are collaborating these two teams together. Collaboration in the sense we are mixing. Okay. So now the development team as well as an operation team, they're going to collaborate together and work on a single platform. Okay. They're going to work on a single platform, so that there will be some transparency between these teams. So once they work on a single part, so they know what developers are doing, and they know developers will come to know what operation guys are doing. So there will be a lot of transparency. And we are also focusing on automation parts, not only collaboration. So we also focus on automation. Like earlier, whatever the task which I have mentioned, right, the compilation part. So instead of doing it manually, so we can automate it. Okay, once the developer check-ins the code, automatically the compilation will be happens. Okay, these are all the things that we are mainly focusing on it. Okay, now um, so because of this automation, so we are going to reduce the human interaction with respect to the application part. So because of that reason, so earlier it used to take months of time to develop. Now it got reduced almost half of the time, right? So that's the main thing we are going to focus today. Like here, most of you guys will think that okay, DevOps is a specific tool, and we guys has to work on that particular tool, but it's not true. So we are mainly focusing on various tools, not a single tool. Here, DevOps is nothing but a culture. Okay, it's a practice. Okay, it's not a specific tool. Okay, we are combining different tools based upon the requirement. Okay, is it clear with this? So before I go with the next slide, so I request you guys, if you have any sort of questions, please let me know. I'll just give you 5 minutes of time.
Hi, sir.
Yeah.
Uh, Sir, basically, I'm into system engineer as a means I'll take care of backup jobs and I'll deals with the daily Linux backups and housekeeping jobs.
Okay.
So, is this AWS topics enough for me to uh, means to jump into DevOps engineer?
Yeah, this is a combination of AWS and DevOps tools.
So,
See,
so what I
what
mean
are
to
all the
say.
things? Yeah, yeah. You
So,
continue with your question first.
yeah, yeah. Actually, I see in the course content, so some concepts from AWS like VPC and Lambda, these kind of topics are not included. Means I want to get some clarification. Is this topics enough for me to sustain as a
So
DevOps engineer?
VPC topics anyway I'm going to cover, but Lambda is somewhat advanced topics.
Okay,
So most of the companies they're still not following this, and we are not focusing on AWS because the main focus will be on DevOps tools, and then
okay,
after we go with the AWS tools because
okay,
in order to implement these DevOps tools, I need some server setup, right? So if I want to
okay,
go with DevOps installation, I mean tool installation, so I need some server setup. I need some
okay,
infrastructure, right? So that
okay,
infrastructure we are going to take from AWS. And also some AWS point of view, we are going to cover few topics that I'm going to explain in the coming next slides. What are all the topics that I'm going to cover?
okay,
Okay.
okay. Okay, so purely DevOps concepts with the AWS platform means
Yes. Yes.
by using the AWS DevOps services.
Yes. Yes.
Mhm. Okay, fine, fine. So may I know the course duration, sir? How many?
It will be around 45 hours.
Okay, daily 1 hour.
Yeah.
Oh, fine. Okay, 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 sir. Thank you, thank you.
Okay. Um, any other questions?
Hello, sir. This is Pradeep.
Yeah. Yeah, Pradeep.
Yeah, basically, I'm from BCom MBA background, so I'm working in
Okay.
a operation side now, payment side.
Yeah.
How it will be worked for me? Because one of my friends suggested me this course. So can you give me an example?
Like, see here, you can mainly focus on the DevOps. The reason is like you're from a BCom background, right?
BCom, yeah, MBA.
MBA, okay. Um, like if you have a computer-based knowledge, like then obviously you can go with the DevOps part because you should know the basics of computer. But we are mainly focusing on every topic that we are going to discuss. Like for example, if we require Linux background, so Linux background we are taking separate sessions for Linux. Okay, 2 to 3
Okay,
sessions we are mainly focusing on Linux. So what are the commands that we use regularly? So these commands we are going to focus, and then we'll start implementing it. So we are coming from base level, everything.
okay.
Okay.
So for me, without any DevOps experience, can I get any chances on the outside of the company? Because as per my knowledge, there is no DevOps in our company.
Okay.
Yeah, can I get any chances without like any experience, DevOps experience?
It will be bit difficult. Like if you see here in market, they're expecting at least 1 year
Okay,
experience on DevOps.
okay. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, I am Ramjit, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, which is better, sir? AWS or DevOps, sir?
So actually, if you observe currently in the market, so both are good, but if you have a combination knowledge, like if you know AWS services as well as the DevOps services, you'll have a lot of opportunities.
DevOps, sir.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm working from SBI, sir. LHO is a AP head office. Yesterday,
Okay.
2 days back, SBI conducted IT jobs, sir. Permanent jobs.
Okay.
Same IT field.
Okay.
Bangalore employees coming SBI. He says AWS is main. DevOps are Azure in the temporary. He says, sir.
That we can discuss offline. Okay.
Okay.
So
Okay.
you can check with the
Hello.
management regarding this.
Hi, sir. Myself is Ravi Prasad.
Yeah.
I am from Hyderabad. I'm developer, Python developer, working for Siemens company. So last year onwards, I am working on the AWS and DevOps tools. Like
Okay.
it is the company not following any Jenkins. It's following CI/CD. CI/CD with GitLab actually. It
That's
is
what.
also uh, this is also
In
continuous integrations, continuous development, right?
Yes, yes, that I'm going to focus in the next coming slide. So
Okay.
see here in DevOps, there is no specific tool that every
No.
company is following. So some
Oh,
companies will use Jenkins, some companies will use GitLab, some companies will use Bamboo. There are different tools available in the market. So based
okay.
upon their choice, they're going with. But
Okay.
if you observe the most of the requirement, like if you see in Naukri or other things, na, so most of the requirements will be on, I mean, most of the openings will be on the tools that we are going to focus on this entire course. Those are
Okay.
the common tools.
Okay, sir. Okay. And also, in AWS, which means like EC2 or something, right? Is there which one is covered actually? How many there are services covered in this course, sir?
That I'm going to explain in the coming next slides.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just asking you for questions related to this DevOps topic, which we discussed till now. Okay,
Oh,
so anyway, I'm going to give you a chance after end of this entire session. Then you can ask me the questions if you have any questions related to tools and all. Okay, fine. Shall I continue? Yeah, thank you. So these are the key benefits of using DevOps. Like we can reduce time. Earlier it used to take months, and now we can reduce it to minutes because there is no manual interaction required. So once your developer check-ins the code, immediately the build compilation will be happen, and we can easily deploy. We can also automate the process of deploying application on the various environments. Okay. Um, those things you can do. And the next one is increase productivity. So productivity in the sense like the main key focusing on like for example, if you if you develop your application, once you are done with your development of your application, so you'll have time to focus on the new features like new requirement. So that comes under productivity. Like we are making those resources to implement a new features or new requirements. So that means your productivity is going to increase. So that will be calculated as a productivity. Okay, so those things we can do, and we can reduce the cost, because here we don't require a separate resource who required to compile your code all the time. So we can reduce those resources. So because of that reason, we can reduce the cost savings. I mean, okay. So all these things will be, and faster delivery. So speed into market. So all these are the key benefits of using DevOps. Okay. Now, as you see here, this is what the diagram look like. On the left side, these things are comes under development part, and on the right side, what are all the things that you see here? Those things will comes under operation part. Okay, and let's focus on CI/CD. So CI stands for continuous integration. So first, let me explain what is meant by integration. So integration is a process of development, and I mean it comes from planning, and then code development, and then build is nothing but compilation, which I've told you before, and then test. It can be a manual testing or a unit testing or functional testing, whatever. So all this comes under testing. So if you are doing some task using these four stages, that entire process we call it as integration. Okay, but what is meant by continuous integration? So if you are doing manually, then we call it as integration. But if you automate this process, anyway, code development you can't automate. So someone has to develop that code, right? So code development we can't automate. Planning is also planning part also we can't automate it. But the build and test part you can easily automate it, right? So if you automate these two processes, then we call it as continuous integration. Okay, so once you automate, like once the developer check-ins the code, so check-ins in the sense, okay, let me explain what is mean by check-in. Check-in in the sense, once the developer done with his code development, he has to save that code in some location, some shared location, right? So that we call it as checking. Okay, so once he has done with the code development, he will be uploading that updated code to some shared directory, so that others can able to get that code from that location. Okay, so that uploading part we call it as check-in. Okay, so once the developer check-ins the code, automatically these two stages will be implemented. So that's that like if you automate this process, then we call it as continuous integration. So in order to achieve this continuous integration, we will use lot of tools. Okay, I'll be explaining those tools in the next coming slides. Now we'll focus on I mean that's about the continuous integration. Now the second part is continuous deployment. CD stands for continuous deployment. So the process of deploying your application and maintain that application, okay, and operate that application. So like that application is running fine or not, that particular maintenance, and monitor that application 24/7. So this entire process we call it as deployment if you do it manually. The same thing if you automate it, then we call it as continuous deployment. Okay, is it clear now? Okay, fine. Now let's talk about the tools that we are going to I mean different tools that are available in the market, and also we are going to discuss on the tools that we are going to cover as part of this course content. Okay, first let's talk about version control tool. So version control tools are nothing but version control tools are nothing but, like for example, I'll explain you a scenario. Let's assume there are 3 developers. Okay, so in real time, we don't give the entire requirements to all these 3 developers at a time, because they will be developing the same piece of code again and again. So what I will do is, instead of that, I'll make it into 3 parts. Okay, if you need to develop 3 buttons, for example, so what I will do, I'll hand over the first button development to developer 1, second button development to developer 2, and third button development to developer 3, in that way. Now, these 3 developers will work individually and they develop the code. Okay. Now, once all these 3 developers done with their code, what I have to do, I need to combine these 3 pieces. Finally, I'll get the 3 buttons output. Right. This is what it's going to happen. Unfortunately, one of the developer is on leave or something. Okay, these developers, they're going to save their particular piece of code on their own laptops. They're not going to share anything. Okay, they're not sharing anywhere. So they've done with the code development, but they're storing that code on their laptops. Unfortunately, one of your developer is away. You're trying to reach him via phone, still you're not getting. Okay. Okay, so now um, in these kind of scenarios, okay, so in the absence of a developer, you can't hand over that application to the client, right? Because you need to combine these 3 pieces, only then you will get a final output. So because of that reason, your application will be delayed. So in order to avoid these kind of scenarios, so we use these version control tools. So what exactly these version control tools are going to do is, so these version control tools are nothing but it's a kind of shared place where every developers can upload their code to that location, so that your manager or your TL can able to get that code from that location and he can share it. Okay, instead of saving your code on your laptop, so you can save that piece of code on these version control tools, so that it will be available for the other team members. Okay, so that's the main advantage of using version control tool. And there is another advantage. So these version control tools will track each and every changes that you are doing. Okay, so tracking each and every changes in the sense, for example, on a specific line or on a specific file or in a specific line, I'm doing some modification. So these tools will save the older line, like the previous line, and the new line in a form of history. So after 1 year also you can still identify it. Okay, so that's a other important feature that we have with version control tools. And if you see here, there are 3 version control tools that are listed over here. So Git, SVN, and CVS. So we are mainly focusing on Git because Git is a distributed version control tool. About this distributed or centralized version control tool topic that I'm going to explain one later, not under this demo part. Okay, so we are mainly focusing on Git and most of the companies are using Git. Okay, if you're going with Git, so you need to have a web-based Git repository, because Git is a software that we generally install it on your laptop, and using commands you can upload your code. But where you are going to upload? So you are going to upload your code to this web-based Git repository so that everyone can able to see the code. Okay, with a graphical user interface. Okay, so that's what we call it as web-based Git repository. Okay, so we have 3 web-based Git repositories that are available in market. So GitLab, GitHub, Bitbucket, etc. So we also have few other tools, but I'm just listed only 3. So we are mainly focusing on GitHub because GitHub is absolutely free tool. Okay, it's hosted on cloud. You don't need to install anything related to GitHub. So just what you have to do is you need to create a free account. Okay, it's absolutely free, and you can create repositories, n number of repositories for free, and you can start utilizing it. There is no limitations at all. Okay, so that's the reason we are mainly focusing on GitHub part. And the next one is AWS. So as I told you before, so we are going to focus on AWS topic. So we are mainly focusing on the topics like EC2 instance and EC2 related stuff, in the sense like VPC, subnets, routing table configurations, and internet gateway, VPC pairing. So these are all the topics that we are focusing on VPC part as well as the EC2 part. Okay, and then we'll be explaining about ELB, Elastic Load Balancer, ECS, Elastic Container Service, EKS, Elastic Kubernetes Service, and auto scaling, and RDS, okay, Route 53 configurations. So there are almost 15 to 20 services we are going to cover as part of this course. Okay, now the next one is integration tools. So these plays an important role. Okay, so integration tools plays an important role in developing, I mean, in automating the things that we discussed earlier, right? So so whatever the automations, like I have explained about CI and CD, right? So whatever the automations that we are mainly focusing, so those CI and CD implementation, you are going to do it on these integration tools. Okay, we have different integrations tools that are available, like Jenkins, Bamboo, TeamCity, continuous delivery. Even in GitLab also we can do it. Okay, so if you see here, we are going to cover, we are going to focus on Jenkins part, because Jenkins is a tool which is an open source tool. I mean to say, open source in the sense it's absolutely free. We don't need to pay any single rupee for installing this application. And also it is a Java based application, so that you can install this tool on any OS. Okay, so any OS you can install it. The only requirement is on that particular server you should install Java first, then only you can install Jenkins. Okay, so we are going to focus on Jenkins part. Like the topics which we are going to cover under Jenkins is like master and slave configuration, role-based strategy method, and pipelines creations, freestyle job creations, and continuous integration pipeline and continuous deployment pipeline. So all these things we are going to cover as part of this integration tool. And the next one is compilation tool. So compilation tools are used for compiling your code, right? As I told you before. So once your code, once your piece of code that you have, that piece of text formatted files needs to be converted into a binary formatted file. Only that binary formatted file you can run it on the target server. Then only your application is going to run. So how we are converting that? So using this compilation tool, text formatted code will be converted into a binary formatted. So based on the language that we have, so the compilation tool will also change. So for example, if you go with Java, so either you can use Ant or Maven. So both are compatible with Java. If you go with C language, so you can go use CMake. The same way if I use .NET, so there will be a tool called MS Build. So based on the language that you select, so based on that, your code will be also, I mean, your application will be there. Compilation application. Okay. And the next one is artifact storage repository. So artifact storage repositories are used to store the artifacts. So as I told you, after the compilation, so you're going to get a binary format output, right? And also I told you that that binary format output, we call it as artifact. Okay, so these are the things, I mean, these artifacts, we need some place where we can store it for future reference, like while deploying application on various environments. So from that location, we can take it and we can install it, right? So in order to store these artifacts, we use this Nexus or artifact tree. Okay, and configuration management tool. So configuration management tools are used for deploying purpose. Mainly we are focusing on deployment purpose. Like what exactly these tools are going to do is, like, for example, I need a requirement, like if I gave you a server and I asked you to install application on that server. So you logged into that server and you executed some commands, some 5 to 10 commands, and you have successfully done installing that application. So for you, it was around 5 minutes. Okay, it took around 5 minutes to complete your task. And the very next day, I gave you 10 servers. Okay, and the very next day, I gave you 10 servers and I asked you to install application on the 10 servers. So what you will do, you will be logging to each and every server manually and then you install. So for one server, it took around 5 minutes, but if you want to implement the same thing on 10 servers, so it will take around 50 minutes. Okay. So because of this reason, what we are doing here, we are spending a lot of time and effort as well, because the same command execution, I have to do it for all the servers. So in this kind of scenarios, we can simply create a, you can use any of these tools and you can start writing some files in it. Like if you go with Ansible, we call it as playbook. If you go with Chef, we call it as cookbooks. So using these playbooks, what we can do, we can define the process or whatever the commands that you're supposed to execute, you can define it in that. Automatically, this configuration management tool will connect with all the 10 servers at a time, and whatever the installation that we're supposed to take care, so those installations will be done. Okay, so that too within less than 5 minutes. So it is going to execute the task on all the 10 servers. Okay, so that's the main advantage of using configuration management tool. So we are mainly focusing on Ansible here. Okay, so the topics which we are going to cover under Ansible is like Ansible introduction, Ansible playbooks creation and different modules explanation. And there will be an advanced topic from Ansible, that is Ansible roles. So these are all the topics we are going to cover. Okay. And then orchestration tool. So as the name itself indicates, orchestra in the sense, so in European countries or in Western countries, if you observe, there will be an orchestra. There will be one person who um makes some kind of signs using his hands and sticks. So based on that, the other people will play that music, right? So that we call it as orchestra. Okay. So the same base, using the same base, we are using these tools called Docker and Kubernetes. So that's the reason these tools were called as orchestration tool. So here it is going to manage the applications. Okay, so these tools are going to manage different applications that are running. So that's the reason we call it as orchestration tool. And the main usage of these tools are like containerized based applications. So if you focus more on this thing now, so we'll be focusing it on later because it's a huge topic. So I can't give you the introduction right away. So as part of this course, we are going to cover both the things. Like we are going to cover Docker as well as Kubernetes. Okay. And the next one is SonarQube. So SonarQube is a tool which helps you to check the quality of your code. Okay. So quality of your code in the sense, like we generally use, I mean, in your code level, you may have some bugs or you may have some vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities in the sense like uh, that we call it as the weakest point of your application. So if you have some weakest point of your applications, what happens here? What it will do is like it is going to um, some hackers for hackers it will be very easy to hack your application, because whenever a hacker is trying to hack that particular application, what they will do is they will mainly focusing on the weakest points. So they will try to search for the weakest point. If they identify any weakest point, through that weakest point they will try to enter into your application. So SonarQube will help you to identify those kind of stuff. Okay, so it helps you to increase more quality of your code. Okay. And the next one is monitoring tools. So monitoring tools are used to monitor your applications, like your target servers are running fine or not. These are all the things that we are going to monitor. So we are going to mainly focusing on Nagios part. Okay. So if your target server is down, so immediately you will get an alert. So based on that, you're going to take an action. Okay. And infrastructure as a code. So this is the one of the new tool that we added recently. So Terraform, uh, like if you want to implement some infrastructure in the sense, now we can focus on AWS especially. So in AWS, I want to launch some EC2 instance, and on top of it, I want to run some application. So here, launching that EC2 instance, we call it as infrastructure. Okay, so that infrastructure creation and everything, you can automate it using Terraform. Okay, so those things we are going to cover. Okay. Okay, then thank you guys. Thanks for joining. Have a nice day. Bye bye.